On our first visit to the dog park, it appeared he wasn't walking up. Though he wasn't doing anything wrong, he was just doing what puppies do. Running around, having fun, getting to know the other dogs. He was clearly the object of disapproval. Did you hear that, Miss Christie? She was sitting at one of the benches in the shade. I'd been throwing George's ball for him and he had just sent it soaring. He galloped off to get it and I sat down. Hear what? What that woman over there said. What woman over where? Shh, Christie whispered, she'll hear you. All right, I said, sorry. I followed her gaze. What, that woman, the one in green? Yes, that woman heard. So what did she say? Christie moved her mouth a little closer to my ear. She pointed and she said, what are those folks doing bringing him here? And then she shook her head. Look there, Christie, now poking in the rib cage. Look, see, she's pointing at him again. I rubbed my rib. Just ignore him. He's a puppy, so he has a perfect right to be here. She beckoned to George, who was galloping back with his prize. She said, picking up the ball from where George had dropped it. She obviously doesn't think so. Well, that's just too bad. He isn't doing anything wrong. I took a look at her as Christie stood and hurled the ball into the air again. The woman's dog was small and well manicured like a lawn, a bit like a 1980s haircut. The dog was white and looked like it might be a Pomeranian. It also, I saw, had a bow in its hair. The bow told me nothing, of course, absolutely nothing. But at the same time, I really couldn't help but consider that, well, it did kind of figure. Would she, I wonder, view George a little more kindly if we'd taken the trouble to accessorize his head? But no, that was silly. It wouldn't make the slightest difference. It was about then that the woman glanced in our direction. Returning back to the other owners she'd been chatting with, their conversation clearly still about George. George was still doing nothing other than playing with the other dogs and puppies, and if anything was doing so a little shyly. You could see that he was nervous about being there. He was actually a bit anxious about all the other dogs milling around him, with or without ribbons in their hair. They were still dogs, pack animals with a code of seniority, and among them, George was very much bottom dog. He looked to me about as threatening as a wet paper bag. You see, said Christie again, indignant as any slighted mother. Ignore her, I told her. George is doing nothing wrong. Besides, if she has something to say about him being here, then she should quit with all the whispering and pointing and come over and say it to our faces. I added a glare in her direction to display my solidarity and decided that the best thing to do was to dismiss her as a silly, neurotic, over-anxious woman. But what did I know? She clearly wasn't alone in her disapproval. That dog shouldn't be in here. It was only a couple of days later and George and I were back in the dog park. This time the person was saying it to my face, and it wasn't the silly, neurotic, over-anxious woman. Well, it might have been some of those things, but he was definitely not a woman. Since I was sitting and he was standing, I blinked up at him, shielding my eyes from the glare of the sun. Excuse me? You shouldn't have your dog in here, he went on. He's too big. This part's for small dog, it says on the sign. I stood up. And puppies, I pointed out, because I've read the sign too. It's also the area